Part 1. So you want to play the violin. You don't have to be a professional violinist to play well and enjoy the violin. You don't have to be a childprodigy, and you don't have to buy $1 million violin to sound good. But you do have to take it step by step. In Lesson 1, you'll take a look and overview of just about everything you can expect to discover as a violinist every step of the way. Then it's time to pick up your instrument. Check out Lesson 2 to familiarize yourself with the names and functions of all the parts of the violin. That lesson also shows you how to tune your instrument so it sounds like it should. Lesson 3 is all about how to hold the violin comfortably. Lesson 1. Introducing the violin. In this lesson, you will getting to know the instrument, making sounds with the violin, reading and playing music, putting music theory into practice, trying different playing styles, choosing and caring for your instrument. You don't have to be a professional musician to enjoy playing the violin. Learning to play for your own enjoyment, for the joy of making music, can be really satisfying. If you've always wanted to play but have never had the chance, or if you've taken some lessons or played a bit at school, this course is for you. It starts right from the first time you open your case and takes you step by step to playing real music on your violin. Bring on the violin. The violin is a member of the string family, which also claims the illustrious viola, the magnificent cello, and the imposing double bass as its own, actually totaling 16 strings among them, or even 17, as some basses actually have 5 strings. People also often include such instruments as the guitar and the harp in the string family, but these relatives lack an essential accoutrement players don't need about to make sounds. So the string family, just like so many human families nowadays, has become known by another name too, bowed string. All of the bowed strings family members bear a distinct resemblance. The overall shape of the instruments is similar, and their sound is instantly recognizable. The smallest member of the string family, the violin, is an instrument that's familiar to people all over the world. Just because the violin's the smallest in size, however, doesn't mean it's the least important or least powerful, quite the contrary. The violin's special soprano voice can express a whole gamut of emotions, even those beyond the power of mere words. The violin can produce tone colors and intensities like the greatest of painters, and it has fascinated and moved players and listeners alike for generations. Making a violin requires great skill, honed through a long apprenticeship, to get more than 70 component parts put together into one beautiful instrument. But most violinists wouldn't know their scroll, the beautifully carved whorl of wood at the end of the violin farthest from the player, from their saddle, the small ebony ridge that supports the whole course of the strings. This unawareness isn't surprising, although most people are pretty familiar with cars, they can't name auto parts either. Plenty of very experienced violinists aren't able to name all the component parts of a violin, mainly because many parts are completely hidden inside the violin after it's put together. They are able to name the key ones though. I discuss the key parts of the violin in Lesson 2 as I take you on a tour of your violin. I also discuss in Lesson 2 some different violin making processes, and I walk you through the steps for getting your violin safely out of its case when you beg in your playing session, and for putting it away again when you're done. Tuning up. After being properly introduced to the violin, you need to tune your instrument before you begin to play. Each string has its own set note that you tune to, so that when you put down your fingers, you get the sound you expect. Tuning the violin can be potentially quite intimidating. Those 4 strings need a checkup tuning every time you start your daily playing session, and they occasionally slip out of tune even during a practice session. This frequent tuning seems a bit unfair. After all, pianists don't have to tune for themselves, they just have to call in the tuner a couple of times a year. And flautists use a fairly simple process to adjust the tuning of their flutes. On the violin, some aspects of tuning can be pretty tricky, so you will get tips on how to tune, and how to deal with managing the tricky stuff too. See Lesson 2. Eventually, the process becomes second nature, and violinists don't mind tuning their instruments, because they sound good when the strings are in tune. And think of those pianos with several notes slipping out of tune, and the tuner not due for months. Pianists have to grit their teeth and wait. Violinists can fix out of tune strings right away. Holding on. In addition to your violin being undoubtedly the most elegant of instruments, another part of its appeal is how debonair violinists look when they're actually playing. Great violinists often look like their instrument is an extension of themselves, but this seemingly effortless posture actually involves a lot of practice. Apart from looking great, taking time to get the instrument comfortably lodged and balanced prevents your playing from becoming a literal pain in the neck. Your arm and finger functions also work optimally when all their muscles are free to move as needed, with no excess tension or creaky joints. Lesson 3 shows you how to hold the violin really well, along with providing a few tips on finding useful accessories to help you in your quest for balance and comfort. Bowing out some sounds. The violin may get most of the glory, but its renown wouldn't be possible without its slender companion, the bow. The bow's job is to activate the vibrations of the strings so that your violin can sing out. When you look at the narrow bow stick, which is only about 29 inches long, and its ribbon of powdery white horsehair, it seems quite amazing how much sound a bow can draw out of the strings, and in how many different ways. Taking a close look at the bow. The bow doesn't have as many components as does its more celebrated casemate, but it has its own quirks and nuances. How can you not appreciate something with a part named frog? I introduce you to the frog and more prosaically named parts of the bow, no toads or princesses, in Lesson 4, which also tells you how to care for your bow so that it stays in tip-top condition. Although your bow doesn't require tuning, it does need its own type of attention before and after every use. And just like the violin, it needs special attention paid to how it's held. You get an introduction to holding the bow properly and you actually bow out a few tunes at the end of Lesson 4. Getting both your hands in on the action. Remember trying to pat your head and rub your tummy at the same time, or is it the other way around? Playing the violin is a good exercise for your brain and hand coordination because your two hands move very differently to make sounds happen. If you're an adult taking up the violin for the first time, you can earn extra points for all that new brain activity. Your left hand has a lot of responsibilities on the violin, making notes both by landing and by lifting fingers on and off the four strings. Fingers also have to move horizontally and laterally to reach various notes on different strings. Eventually, the left hand also moves to different locations farther up the strings to find those impressive high notes. Lesson 5 gets your left hand actions off on the right track, showing you the finger numbering system for the violin and the way to successfully land your fingers on the strings without getting a pilot's license. But all that left hand work can't make an impact if the bow doesn't stroke the strings, and that's where your right hand gets to work on its important job, to hold your bow just right. When you assemble all your bowing skills, the bow can make a whole range of sounds, from singing sweetly in lyrica music to hammering out sounds in passionate passages. Lesson 6 sets you on the right path by bringing your hands together to bow and finger the notes simultaneously. You make music by using some simple charts, and you finish up with songs that pull all your skills into action. Reading between the lines. The first songs you meet in this book don't require the ability to read music, because they're written out in handy charts. The charts allow you to play simple songs right away as you begin to play your violin. However, when you find out how to read actual musical notation, you can play more advanced music and enjoy a wealth of songs and pieces. Printed musical notation is a shorthand system that communicates a whole world of playing instructions to musicians. These instructions include information about which notes to play, and at what speed and rhythm, how loud or soft the music needs to be, and a wealth of other visual information that helps you to make the sounds right. As an added advantage, the ability to read music allows you to understand music that's been written for any instrument or singer, not just for the violin. Knowing the notes. Reading music is a bit like reading a language written with a different alphabet than the one you're used to. Printed music has similarities to what you already know, you just need to get to know the new system. The notes belong on those famous 5 lines, with the lines functioning much like a ladder. The higher the notes climb the ladder, the higher the sound you get. Notes have slightly different appearances according to their time values. Various symbols give musicians information about the volume, how to attack the notes just with a bow, no arrow necessary, and so on. To crack the secret code, see Lesson 7, which takes you through the symbols and signs and shows you how to make them into actual sounds. Getting rhythm. All the melodies in the world would be a lot less listenable if it weren't for rhythm. Dancers would trip over one another, soldiers would fall over like dominoes, and toe tappers would be totally frustrated. Rhythm gives life and energy to music and lets you dance to the tunes of many different drummers, or violinists. Lesson 8 introduces you to the most important elements of rhythm and shows you how to count your way through the different values. In Lesson 9, you put those rhythms together into different measures so you know when to waltz and when to polka. Digging deeper into music. Writing notes on the page and knowing the time values of the notes is just the start of playing music. After you learn those basics, doors open to the big leagues. Scales and key signatures. Scales often inspire dread because they used to be drilled and repeated endlessly in the bad old days. But scales are really the building blocks to music, enabling musicians to find their way around just about any piece. Knowing your scales well gives you fluency and confidence, and there's nothing wrong with those attributes. Lesson 10 covers some of the most essential scales for a violinist. After you know some scales, you have the picks to unlock these little signs, containing up to 7 sharps or flats, occur at the very start of each piece of music and are repeated as reminders at the start of every line throughout the piece. A key signature is a way of telling musicians exactly which notes to play in a particular piece. Lesson 11 shows you how to read and recognize the different key signatures. Harmony. Although violins usually play the melody one note at a time, one of the advantages of a string instrument is that its 4 strings enable players to play up to 4 notes at once when needed. But just as pickles and ice cream don't mix, not all notes work well together. Lesson 12 combines some of these notes into sweet harmonies, so you don't marry dill and vanilla. Getting stylish. The violin is well loved for its versatility and for the panoply of sounds it can make, from the gentle singing of a slow, peaceful lullaby to the dazzling cascade of brilliance in a virtuoso showpiece. You probably already have a great desire to tackle some fancy tricks and to coax all kinds of exotic sounds out of your violin. The good news is that you can begin to do some pretty neat things as you look into the chapters that deal with the development of fancier techniques and styles. Dazzling Technique. After you master some different ways of playing with the bow, you can add new dash and panache to your sounds. Even the names of the different bowings sound very fancy. When you bump into your friends, you can casually let drop that you're playing spiccato, and then after a suitable pause for effect, you can let them know that this is a bow stroke where the bow bounces off the strings of the violin. Seeing the words brush stroke may make you wonder what a violinist is doing with a brush, but you don't have to transform into Chagall to play your violin, you just add an artistic brushing movement to your bow strokes, bringing a whole new palette of sounds to your fingertips. Lesson 13 introduces you to a choice menu of bowings, some in the meat and potato department, and some definitely in the sinful dessert category. In Lesson 14, you go through a similar journey of discovery with your left hand, getting your fingers to dance across the strings, almost doing a violin version of the Highland Fling, and do other neat moves. Not only do your fingertips lift and land on one string, but they also slide and hop to different spots on that same string, ready to leap across to another string at any time. Sometimes 2 different fingers play on 2 different strings at once. Just when you have those fingers in line, you find out how to move your left hand to high positions, and back again, so that you can play high notes or make slinky sounding slides. Multicultural music. The violin is like a chameleon, it's at home just about anywhere. In addition to the more classical styles of playing, many other cultures all over the world have their own unique styles featuring the violin and its relatives, from the Chinese 2-string eru, which has a ravi shing and magical vocal sound, to the Indian sarangi, a very expressive and exotic instrument with 3 gut strings to play on and a whole array of metal strings that vibrate sympathetically. But you don't need to get hold of an eru or a sarangi to play in different styles. Lesson 15 takes you on a visit to some different musical styles that you can play with your very own violin. You can fit right in, whether you're at a ceilidh, at a smoky jazz club, or in a gypsy caravan. A violin of your own. As you embark on your important and exciting violin project, you may be quite sure you're going to love the violin, so you may want to buy one right away. However, you may feel cautious about jumping in, so you may be considering renting an instrument for a while. Either option can be a very successful way to get started. Finding the right instrument with the right price tag for you, whether it's through buying or renting a violin, is a personal decision that affects your enjoyment and progress. You want to feel satisfied with the instrument you play, so your violin needs to sound good enough. Lesson 16 discusses some of the issues to consider before you make a decision about what's best. After you're equipped with all the gear, you can find out how to take good care of it and do the necessary maintenance. Keeping your violin and bow in tip-top condition takes only a few simple steps. Lesson 17 covers these in detail, even talking about what to do if an accident occurs to your violin, discussing daily care, changing strings, and traveling safely with your violin in hand.